Hi, friends. Host Eric here. Host talking with fitness people, and I had some fun last time I did one of these live stream Q and A's. So I thought I'd attempt another one. If you have any questions of any sort for me, this is the title. Of this is Ask Me Anything, AMA. And normally, when people ask me something, they'll typically be asking me cognitive function questions. But I'm happy to answer any kind of questions. I typically have opinions about everything. If I don't know anything about it, I'll tell you I don't know anything about it. But I know about a lot of different things, so I usually got some sort of thought on something. So if you are somebody who's got any sort of questions about cognitive functions, debate, YouTube, music, or art production, or aesthetics, or no, I'm not going to Berkeley this year. I'm might be taking kids to the Cal Lutheran tournament down here, which is the same weekend. I do know a little bit about everything. Well, not everything, but a lot of things. And I would attribute that somewhat to being an ENTP, but somewhat to being a debate coach as well, because obviously when you coach debate, you end up researching all sorts of different topics. And if you want to do creative debate coaching, then you end up looking for squirrely kind of critiquey kind of things you can run, and you end up learning a lot of stuff, I mean, I think that's why when I took right to debate and ended up going into the field, although I was stumbled into it. I mean, I was an English teacher, and then I went to a school where they had a middle school debate team that the high school coach wanted to unload on somebody. And I had said in the interview that I was capable of doing debate because I was just sort of looking for things to put on my resume, And that's how I ended up coaching it. I like coaching it a lot, and I was surprised to discover that I was good at it. I hadn't really, besides debate in high school, I hadn't really done anything that was merit based that had a concrete success criterion that I was competitively successful at before. Conscious and unconscious SE. Well, I mean, the thing is, SE is both a data source and a form of action. Like in the moment, in real time, you're getting data from your senses in SE, from your SE senses if you're a sensor with SE, right? So you're paying attention actively to that data. And then you're using that data to make decisions. And so it's like if you're just an SE person who's using SE and NI together, you're sort of knowing what to do with given change in the data field in the real-time moment. If you're SE unconscious, then instead of using that action attention of externally focusing on what's actually the data in the real world, you're focused on some sort of ideational representation of it or of something else. So you might be inning in your head. Your eyes and your ears and your nose are still picking up sensory data, but you're not attending to it consciously. It's just you're running on autopilot there. That's in real time. Are we nature or nurture? Both. Are we blank slates or slaves to evolutionary drives? I don't believe in evolution. Which MBTI books would you recommend to your viewers? Exciting Tables and Words about Human Personality by host Eric. You can get it for free at my blog, which is blogspot.riceastrust.com or riceastrust.blogspot.com, I mean. Both blank slates have some programming, I'd say. Advanced mode, that but for gender. Gender is a physical attribute. Unlike most of the things we talk about, gender is actually a physical attribute. You either have two X chromosomes or one Y chromosome, and that determines your gender. There are two of them, and there's a third option. Let's see what other questions do I have here so far. Nothing else yet. Let's see what this says. How would you describe the manifestation of sixth slot SE? Well, sixth slot SE, it's like an ESFJ. Or like my dad, ESTJ. It's pretty good. I mean, the thing is, just as I understand basically how things work, I just don't like prioritizing the values associated with that and making the status determinations, because that runs afoul of my TINE. Their 6-slot SE is quite effective. ESTJ, ESFJ, they're both great doers of things and getting shit done, because the thing is, SE, their 6-slot function is natural aspect mate to TE. TE's natural data source is SE, because it's responsive in real time to changes in the environment. So the takeaway from that is that they have a nice relationship with their 6th function, just as INTPs have a nice relationship with their 6th function. INFPs don't, because they lead with a contrary aspect to their 6th function. Nicotine prevents Alzheimer's disease. Great. Good to hear. I don't want Alzheimer's, so that's consistent with my desires. It also prevents lung Alzheimer's, where your lungs forget how to breathe. Smoking keeps my lungs on their toes. Otherwise, they get complacent, and nobody does well with complacent lungs. Nootropics you recommend? I don't know what nootropics are, but I'm assuming it's sort of a psychoactive substance. Well, I'm a big fan of mushrooms and marijuana. I also like amphetamines and nicotine, caffeine. All 8 functions is a form of ADD. Good night. Okay. Good night. The point is, I would say that SE and NE, you can think of them, there's SE, NE, SI, and NI. You can think of all 4 of those things as data sources, as well as whatever else they are. So the one, I don't hate female ENTP at all. I'm quite compassionate regarding her. Oh. No, I don't hate her at all. I'm somewhat impressed by her, and I somewhat feel bad for her. I'm impressed by her just absolute mind-boggling persistence, and I feel bad for her because I think if she were this mind-boggling persistent about something that was true, she'd be a lot better off, you know? Let's see. My take on autism Asperger's spectrum is that it correlates with NITE specifically, because then you have, if it's INTJs have polar FE, and they're also metaphysical in their dominant slot, which makes them have a weird relationship with the physical world and emotions. ISTJ usually isn't so Asperger's-y because they're rooted in their animal self of their SI. Okay, as far as the data about percentages, so this person asks, why do you think some types are more rare than others, and do you believe that the data suggesting the population of types is correctly typing, example, 25% ISTJ? No, I don't think the, thank you. I don't think the, I don't trust the data on percentages of commonality very much at all. It's hard to say though, because my experience on the internet is going to naturally, I'm going to encounter a lot more intuitives who tend to be interested in this stuff than I am sensors, because I'm talking about this kind of stuff. But the thing is, my take on it is ENTPs are rarer than they think, because I just don't seem to encounter very many of them. And probably probably intuitives in general are less common than people think, because I've noticed that the tests tend to spit out intuitive on a lot of people who are just smart sensors, and probably spit out intuitive on my dad. I wouldn't be surprised if most tests would, but he's definitely a sensor. What are your thoughts on Tim Harris and Dave Asprey? There's a lot of trendy life hacker entrepreneurs nowadays. These two are the most popular. I'm not familiar with either of them, Tim Harris or Dave Asprey. As far as trendy life hacker entrepreneurs nowadays, I suspect that they're mostly all just TE DOMs who are sharing their TE wisdom with people, saying you got to be goal oriented and you got to figure out how to do shit. And you got to know what you want and know how to go get it. Well, FITE. That's fine. Dave Asprey's okay. Well, I don't know who they are. How can you tell apart an INTJ and an ISTP? Well, you look for INTJs and ISTPs, I guess, have a fair amount in common, but the difference is the FE. FE polar looks way different than FE fourth slot. FE fourth slot is very concerned about FE. It's just not very effective at it. FE polar is blind towards it and will often mistake like heuristics for FE. We'll miss sarcasm and we'll take things too literally and stuff like that. Oh, well, look. Conk says that his guess of rarity of types is based on long-term evolutionary traits. Too many ENTPs and tribe dies need to mix sensors and to control. I mean, I don't know why ENTPs are so much more rare. It does make sense that we don't need very many of ENTPs. Like, I want to be doing this kind of stuff, which means I need a lot of people who want to be paying attention to somebody. Even when I go and pay attention to somebody else, like I watched Pukoki's live stream, I guess it was last night or something. Mostly, I stopped paying attention to the live stream entirely and just started trolling in the chat, asking ridiculous questions. Like, if you walk into a room and discover, to your surprise, two women scissoring, and one of them asks you for a towel, but there is no towel, and you're not allowed to say the word towel, what do you say? I remember when I typed in the chat, I don't remember what they were barely even talking about. So, you need to have some people who want to be an audience, right? You can't just have people who want to be on stage all the time. Plus, we need somebody to grow the weed. You can't just have people smoke it. How do I define FI and FE, says the thinker? FI is most straightforwardly defined as an interested calculus, and FE as a social universal interface. So if you're interfacing with the world in a way that the frame of reference in which you're dealing stays static. So it's like if I'm dealing with a broken doorknob, let's say, then the broken doorknob isn't going to change while I stand there and think about it and look at it, right? It's static. But if I'm having a conversation, if I just stand there and look, the other person doesn't pause. It doesn't remain static in that regard. So
you still need to fix the doorknob.
I know I still need to fix the doorknob. The doorknob remains unfixed until I fix it, unfortunately. What was I looking for? Oh, right, docs. So anyway, the thing about that is because I lost my place. I know what I was doing. I was looking for this thing. Why do I only find Latinas hot? What drives that? Well, it's called imperialist sexuality. You want to be the imperialist white man bringing your Christianity by your penis to the women of old Mexico. And it's a metaphor. It's an archetype. It's an allegory. It's all of those things and more. Let me look at this untitled document here. that I was working on earlier. And I'll get important information to share with you when I read it from this document. This is me replacing SI with the computer. All right, so interface functions TE and FE comprise strategies of response. On the real-time plane, if that to which we attend remains static within our frame of reference, then we are attending to the physics of the world as understood in its broadest sense, and we attend via TE. If that which we attend to is fluid within our frame of reference, like a conversation where silence matters, right? Duration matters. So the doorknob will wait indefinitely for me to go and do the next step, but a person won't. So it's got to be it's a fluid frame of reference. Hi, Eric. What type would you want to be if you weren't ENTP? Either ISFJ or INFJ. ISFJ, I get how they are, and I understand, like, I have a good feeling for what it would be like to be an ISFJ because it's my dual. It would just mean prioritizing everything backwards, basically. But and INFJs, I think, are cool, and I know that they are going to successfully get most people to think they're cool, and I like to be cool because of my third slot, FE, and my hidden agenda of being loved. So INFJ is a natural choice for me to think that would be a fun type to be. And it'd be cool to be ESTP as well. Then I'd really slay the puss, let me tell you. I'd be out there, yeah, call me daddy. Like that, all day long, all day, every day, if I were an ESTP. Instead of doing this stupid crap all the time, talking to you guys. Gosh. Well, I'd much rather be an ENTP than an ESTP, actually. What happens to the type versus type debate series? Oh, it was too much work. I didn't follow through on it. You know, it's like I got to be smart when I set myself on larger projects. There's got to be a template that's easy to complete. Like when I do type police videos, I just have to set it all up ahead of time, and then once it's done, I just upload it. Which means I got to put the badge in a certain spot and put the camera in a certain spot and set up the video ready to go and get the theme song queued up ready to go and all that kind of stuff. But that's easy. I don't have to do any. I have to make a document. Things I do make documents a lot to do videos, but that's always being inspired by the idea in the moment, going like, oh, I want to clarify this in my own head, so I'm going to write it down about SE data sources and any data sources. Because if you think about it, if you're doing TE on the doorknob, you're using an SE data source when you're doing it right. You're focusing on the doorknob and the specifics of what you're actually seeing. If you're doing it wrong, like I do, you're using any as a data source, and you're going, well, here's a possible thing I could do to fix this, or here's another non-standard, non-correct possible thing that it could be, or I could do, or maybe if I tried shoving this paintbrush in there, it's like stupid shit. Hey, why didn't you comment on the video link I sent you between the Christian and the atheist? I don't know. I don't think I watched that one. I did watch a video that somebody sent me about Christian. I'm more or less Christian, Conk. I'm more Christian than I am anything else. It's a more accurate set name for me than any other set name. Yeah, well, Jesus and I are chatting about it. We're clearing it up. He's a little bit skeptical. I don't blame him. I've been teasing him about the holes in his hands and his feet for a long time now. And he finds it hard to believe that I suddenly switched it up. Which type is most likely to want to intellectually and strategically crush other people, and why? And second most likely type. I would say ESTP is most likely to do that, followed by INFJ, because they're beta quadra and they want to be hierarchically superior. And yeah, you might think ENTP. I like the fray of battle, and I like the adrenaline of competition, but anytime I think that I've seen somebody actually getting their feelings hurt or is feeling bad, granted, it's got to be pretty obvious for me to for it to hit me in the face and go, uh-oh. But when that happens, I got no killer instinct, really. If I see I'm hurting somebody in any capacity, then I tend to pull back. Could polar FE detect sarcasm but not know how to respond to it? I think polar FE is aware of sarcasm. I mean, people with polar FE, people who don't attend ever through extroverted feeling, are nevertheless still aware that sarcasm exists and probably have a personal history with it of developing some heuristics to pick up on it, because they probably have missed it on a few occasions and had people say to them, "No, I'm being sarcastic." Right? So I am an ENFP. Should I accept that I'm doomed for life as an internally conflicted person? Well, you're attentionally conflicted. So what that means is you act on the metaphysical plane in terms of meanings first and foremost, but you judge on a physical plane in terms of attachment or interest or preciousness or whatever, right? FI. So when you're judging things, they always link to your authentic preference. But when you're making meaning, your meanings are never adequate expressions of your authentic preference. And so there's this constant in life transliteration process that you have to do between FI and NE and back again, between meaning and physical judgment, because they're native to different aspects of reality. Physical judgment, FI, is native to real time. You experience it in real time, but it still has an intentional aspect to it that extends across time. I don't really understand what that is very well, to be honest, but there's something, So, that's where the transliteration comes in, is you bring your FI in conjunction with FE, which is an interface function that you countervalue to help translate your NE into a currency that you naturally can make judgments upon. And so, namely, your feelings. And so, yeah, there's certain conflict in that implicitly. But on the other hand, you don't have that ENTP desperateness, and you don't have that ENTP fakeness. One of the things that can plague ENTPs is they're a little bit desperate for attention or affirmation or whatever, and they're a little bit
ENTPs?
Yeah.
Fucking babies.
Right. Well, we're babies too, but I guess you'd say there's not a very clear, authentic presentation that we link to early on and then attempt to match up with. Rather, we develop habits of presentation that work, that all are somewhat constructed, but some of them become so habitual they settle onto us like as though they were our natural personalities. But we never really forget that there's not a clear self to display in some regard. You don't have that problem. Good evening, Steely Bob. Would you debate someone with a verified IQ of 220 live on YouTube? Sure. I mean, I don't care how smart a person is. Intelligence, IQ is only a medium good correlate to success in debate. Debate's an art form and a sort of a science. And there are a finite number of things you can do with it. You're not infinitely empowered to use insight and creativity to reinvent the rhetorical world. Any opinion on antinatalism? I don't know what antinatalism is. Is SE simply paying attention to the surroundings or focusing on the experience in the moment? SE is paying attention to what's happening in the moment, including your role in what's happening, because it's attending to the external world via the senses. We refer to the actions taken that are reactive or directive towards the external world as being an expression of expert sensing as well. And the thing about that is, when we're taking that form of action, we're either initiating a new action based on some change in the data flow or persisting in an existing action. So that's why we think of SE, or I call SE sometimes follow through, is it's persisting on the given decided course of action. Now, the natural real-time knowing function is SI, which means keeping track of what you've already decided to do, which naturally goes with SE. However, the pair mate with SE is NI because SE is concerned foremost with acting in the now, so NI provides the when quality to that, whereas SI provides the what quality when you're persisting in things. SE is paired with NI when new data comes into the data stream, and causes the SE to initiate new action via SE. It does that initiation of new action according to the dictates of NI, not according to the dictates of SI. So the thing about that is, along with SE and SI, the other two physical real-time functions that are native to that environment are TE and FI. But nobody has all four native physical functions. Everybody has three of one and one of the other. So I'm three metaphysical, one physical. Some people are three physical, one metaphysical. Like INTJ is three physical, but metaphysical on top. Kimberly's one of those types as well. She's physical on top, but three metaphysical underneath. I'm three metaphysical on top, one metaphysical at the one physical at the bottom. Same as like INFJ. And I don't even remember what question I was answering. The thinkers, antinatalism, not giving birth, or against it. Well, I guess it would depend on your reasoning as to why you are opposed to it. If you're saying, or what your claim is, or you're saying it's a moral obligation to be opposed to giving birth, are you saying it's a political statement of some sort? Are you saying that it's best for your body's health? Or, are you saying my goal is to keep my badge tore up so I can keep taking the D? Okay, well, that's another possible warrant for it. So you have to be more specific as to why one is choosing to not give birth. Who's a famous ENTP that you think would make a good representative for your type? I think John Cleese is a good famous ENTP representative. I personally identify with and feel is a really good example of my particular manifestation of ENTP is, I'm drawing a blank on his name, of course, Steve Allen. Steve Allen is a good manifestation of ENTP that's very much like me. He wrote a million songs and did a bunch of different stuff, talk show host kind of guy. Okay, so have I ever debated anyone on YouTube? I mean, I've debated some random people who come around. Nobody's ever taken me up on it. So Francesca, then the question is, what are you saying about it? Are you saying it's a good thing to do / altruistic thing to do because of this particular benefit? Are you saying that people are morally obligated to do it because of that particular effect? Are you saying that that we ought to make policies about it? It depends, Oh, well, whoever asked it. What's your opinion of the religion of Islam? I mean, I think it's a cancer, basically. Or at least it correlates strongly with pre-Enlightenment thinking. My problem with it is not terrorism. My problem with it is an institutionalized marginalization of women and treating them as second-class people, a culture-wide disdain for individual rights, a prioritization of their understanding of the sacred over our free expression, and a willingness to kill people who speak words that they deem insulting to their religion. And the problem here is when I'm not talking about extremist Muslims. I'm saying these positions represent the common position of the average Muslim in, say, Egypt, where they had massive demonstrations to try to get the U.S. to extradite the filmmaker of that Islam, whatever Islam movie, and kill him. That's crazy. Okay, well, I mean, what do you want to debate? Conk? Sure, I'll debate. Like one of those. Do you think the Republican Party could be taken back from the fundamentalists? I imagine political dysfunction being much less if libertarians retook control for 54 years. I don't think the Republican Party is in the hands of fundamentalists. I think the Republican Party is in the hands of pragmatists, social conservatives, which I guess is probably what you mean by fundamentalists, and self-serving demagogues.
Could you move your microphone, Kim?
That's good to eat, Kim. It's good to eat. What do you think the easiest and hardest cognitive functions to determine in a person are? Well, it really depends on where they are in the stack. So sometimes I'll see like an INTJ and I'll just know they're INTJ because you can kind of see the polar FE. Sometimes the easiest way to type somebody is to see what's polar, you know? And in that case, you're not really identifying a function, you're identifying the absence of a function.
Yeah. You can just be walking along and smell it. It's very stinky.
What, FE polar?
Yes.
Okay, so Francesca says, do you think if women are given too much freedom, society can degrade because we are generally more emotional and more laws should be enforced? You know, MGTOW. Yes, I'm familiar with MGTOW. I think it's a bunch of nonsense. Do you think society can degrade if women are given too much freedom? I mean,
What?
the idea that women are given freedom is insane. They're individual human beings with the same rights as every other individual human being. And it's
Who
not.
brought you into this earth?
I mean, the thing is, to the extent that anybody's giving women freedom, then either their rights are currently being oppressed because they are being limited in ways they shouldn't be, or they're being enabled to do things they ought not be able to do, which is bad, not because they're women, but because the thing they're being able to do is not morally acceptable. For example, abortion. Abortion shouldn't be legal. Not because women shouldn't have a choice, but because they're killing another human being and it's morally unacceptable. And there's no way to justify it. You can't come up with any normative ethics that sustains that mechanism of justification across the board in a way that's consistent and passes any kind of argumentational scrutiny. Okay, well, I mean, I don't think there's any risk of stronger men coming and taking over. Like, we have a lot of women in the government, right? But I don't sense that we're going to get invaded, the United States, by any other country. I don't think anybody thinks that. You might say, well, these women are going to be more bleeding heart, and so they're going to let in more immigrants. But I mean, it might be the case that if you look at the general population of women, a higher percentage of women are going to make mistakes in their politics that correlate with too much liberalism, I guess, or feelings-based liberalism. But it doesn't tell us anything about any individual woman. And additionally, any population of people is gonna break somewhere along those lines on something. So my point is, what are you recommending we do about it, even if it's true? Are you saying that we should prevent women from voting? I mean, I'm not a big fan of believer of voting, but it seems a little silly. That abortion stuff is not just my opinion. Okay, what I'm telling you is the argumentation does not break in favor of abortion. Believe me, I spent years trying to justify it, but I've worked through all the argument chains and it's not justifiable. There's no normative system that consistently applied, normatively allows, or renders morally permissible abortion. It just doesn't work. What's the metric by which you are evaluating that in this instance it's okay to kill what is factually a member of the species Homo sapiens? And whatever your answer is, if applied across the board to test it, it doesn't work. In general, men care about fighting the ideal evil. Women want to fight suffering. Men want to sacrifice for the greater good. Men would find any amount of sacrifice evil. I don't want to sacrifice for the greater good. I want to protect the integrity of the system so that fairness and justice can prevail, in which case good is maximized naturally, not through intention. When we try to maximize, it, then we're aiming at the wrong point. We're being ends based rather than means based. Focus on the integrity of the process, and the ends will take care of themselves. C.S. Joseph is not an EHP. Thanks, Jordan Spike. I am somewhat practiced. Let's see if I've missed any questions. Do you get your morals from God? If you come across uncontroversial proof that God doesn't exist, would you still hold on to your morals? And where would you get your justification for these morals? Okay, so the answer to this is pretty straightforward. We can logically deduce that that negative moral prohibitions against rights of others comprise a 1/2 of the moral equation, which is to say, because you're going to have to answer some questions. Because remember, this argument doesn't occur in a vacuum. It always occurs between two people. So the opponent who's trying to argue that there's no universal morality, or that there's no non-God-based morality, they still have to answer questions about which status of a statement like slavery is morally acceptable. Do you want to attach yourself to the status false or true on that? And if you say true, then we can deduce negative rights from that logically, and we can just simply say we don't need to make any claim other than I agree that this is on some level technically not universal, but for you to ascribe it non-universality, you're going to have to affirm slavery. Do you want to do that? And then if they don't, then then you don't get to de-universalize it. So otherwise you create inconsistencies. So I would say, yeah, the negative morals can be logically deduced. The thing that happens, and people don't make this distinction, it's a critical distinction to understand the whole issue, is positive morals work differently. So because we can deduce the negative obligation not to do harm to another person or transgress against their rights, people assume we can therefore deduce logically or know with certainty what our positive obligations are. But that's absolutely not the case. Altruism is generally considered a good thing, trying to do good for other people. But one can make the argument, and certain kinds of altruism actually do harm. So if I give $20 to the homeless person and he's like, oh, cool, I got $20. I'm going to get a fatter sack of heroin this time, and then shoots it all at once and dies of an overdose. Have I done an altruistic thing by giving him the $20? Well, it's hard to say, right? It's a tricky question. So the only way that one can really know what one's positive moral indications, namely what one ought to do, or obligations, what one must do, or prohibitions, what one, not prohibitions, sorry, skip that one. Well, one, indications or obligations, or permissibilities, what's permissible but not required, should you do it or not, that kind of thing. In that case, you need some sort of magical thinking or supernatural element, or God, or just faith. You have to have faith at some point. When you're trying to deal with positive moral indications, you can't justify them logically as derived from universals. So as a consequence, you've got to justify it via some personal relationship with a non-falsifiable and fundamentally non-rational approach. I go with the slabs, or God, or sweet, 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 delectable baby Jesus. The most delectable of all of the deities, the youngest, the cutest, the most likely to induce "aww" is our Lord and Savior Jesus. Except for the holes in the hands and the feet. Again, those have always bothered me. I've always teased him about them. Let's see. Yes, I've heard of Gnosticism. You're talking about allegorical shit in general when you're doing that stuff. So I don't know. I have a huge reason for that in our biology, but it does make me wonder, hearing certain arguments, if we have any right making decisions about what happens or who we let in. If we have no desire to fight for anything when it goes wrong, maybe at least some targets should be met before anyone votes. Certain types of altruism do harm. Look up Redmond Man Group. They recently had a talk on women in agency talking about female morals versus man morals. Okay, well, I understand that women may not agree with this under this framework of morality. I mean, I think that the one thing that I can do in general in life is to try to get across to people who aren't naturally reflexively preferring this kind of approach to understanding politics and decision making and individuals and rights and stuff. I want to promote this language so that, and that's the thing is, he who controls the narrative controls reality. If the frame of reference for every sort of policy decision is first and foremost, let's see what the impact on individual rights is, then we have an entirely different set of laws being passed than if the first order of business is to check to see if it has solvency, which is the status quo, right? Well, is this going to work? Is this going to work, and is it going to address the problem that we've defined narrowly? Well, that's the wrong first question to ask. The first question to ask is this morally acceptable? In other words, is this rights violating? Like right next to you over there. Little miss there. Why do you think so many people are not confident at all? I'll get back to your reincarnation question, Jason Rodriguez. I think Desir 13's question is very interesting. And I'll get to your question too, Dan Klein. Why do I think so many people are not confident at all? Well, I think it is because, well, first of all, to be confident, you have to want to be confident up to a certain point. There are lots of people who are not interested in projecting FE stuff. They're confident about certain things that they're confident about, and they're not confident about other things. They may not be confident about social interaction, so they're not going to project confidence. But it doesn't mean that they're not confident about other things. It's typical FITE people, right? They don't pay much attention to the social dynamic aspect of confidence. But Kimberly, is it possibly give me a drink? My mouth is super, super dry. But for people who actually lack confidence, there's a safety in self-deprecation for TI users, especially the TI above FE. There's a safety in being defensible in your claims that TI-FE people tend to mistakenly apply to social considerations. So it's like, well, I'll be defensible in my claims by being socially self-deprecating and or just not taking any social risks, really. Like INGPs don't really take any social risks. The bottom line is you've got to have to display truly as confident. You're going to have either FE up high, like, and you'll probably be an extrovert. You're going to have FE first slot, like at ESFJ, ENFJ, or third slot, like ESTP, ENTP. Yes, David Sanderson. Oh, you're saying, I see. Let me go back up here and answer this question here. What does the implicit function mean? Like the dominant function or demonstrative? The implicit value is what I call the value that correlates with the dominant function. God damn it. That's the problem with putting this thing on air. It's like, I don't know I didn't know what else to really call it, but it basically is a value that says, should I go into this stadium over here and see what's going on in here and play around in here? You sort of take a quick look, and if it looks like a place that's extremely dry, for example, has no FI aspects to it, and you're an FI dom, then you're going to be like, this doesn't meet my threshold for a fit environment for my attentional manners, a fit ecosystem for my attentional manners, because it doesn't allow my nature to really come out at all. All right. If I had to spend all day giving speeches to an okay, so imagine this job. I'm sitting at a stool all day, right? And people come up to this intercom. They push a button to let me know they're there, and then I speak a little paragraph out loud to them. I have to say it the same way every time, and I have to say exactly the same words every time. That would kill me by the end of the day. It would absolutely kill me because I can't do anything with it. I'm not allowed to say not even one word off, and I have to say it the same way every time. I'm trying to get it exactly the same way every time. And it would be like absolute death because I'm trying to do the opposite of, I'm supposed to do the opposite of what I want to do and what is my nature to do, which is to come up with different ways of saying it and saying different voices, saying funny voices. Or if I were allowed that flexibility in the job, then it would meet my implicit criterion for a viable experience, because it doesn't have to be all about NE, but if it allows me to have my NE do its thing, in other words, if it allows me to pay attention by my native, natural, my program function, then I'll be happy to go at least participate in that experience to some extent. Whereas if it doesn't do it at all, then I just want to avoid it at all costs. What do I think about reincarnation? I mean, I think it's bullshit. I don't know. It's like, why would we think that? It seems like the numbers don't work. What about, there's more people being born now. Like, is there a line of souls? Or what if you run out of old souls to go into new bodies? Doesn't that happen? Because, well, I guess maybe it doesn't. I don't know. It seems like there are a lot of people being born. You might run out of old souls. What happens if you run out of old souls? It's a good question, right? Or what happens if you don't have enough new bodies? It's just, like I said, do they have to wait in line? There's a lot of mechanical concerns I have about it. Let's see. Every time I realized I've always viewed the church as philosophy lessons, but you, as view a priest as a philosopher, take things more literally. Well, if I were a priest, I'd be a metaphysician, which is just a person who's a doctor of metaphysical issues rather than physical issues or psychological issues. Metaphysical issues are a different sort of thing than psychological issues. Do I take any supplements to keep my lungs healthy? Yes, tobacco, marijuana. I used to take methamphetamine a long time ago. I used to smoke that. Help my lungs. It was one of the more intense sort of workout times. My lungs got cut and bulky. But right now, I just add supplements of tobacco and marijuana. This seems to do the trick. I got a massive lung capacity. I'll demonstrate it in a minute with the bong rip. I could play a badass priest. Yeah. I shoot my gun, but the bullets are all faith. What's the difference between NI and TI truth? That's a very good question, Spacey NYC. That's not the first good question you asked today. The thing is, NI truth is non-reductive. So, for example, if I know that a joke's not funny, I could try to explain why it's not funny, but ultimately, it's the complete package of reasons why it's not funny. Even harder. Oh, I agree with you. Math is not bueno. You should not do math. I was a math addict for about 4 years, from 2001-ish or so to 2005 or so. So I agree with you, Teacup Noir. It's a bad thing to do. It's really hard to keep a handle on. It's almost impossible. Okay, so NI truth and TI truth. So yeah, NI truth is holistic. You like, why is a joke funny? You can explain it in certain reasons, but it's not ultimately parsable as a logical thing like that. It's knowing things that are because of a composite of various force vectors all meeting at one point and causing a reality to be so. Why is that song a hit? Well, because it's great, it's catchy. Well, why is it great and catchy? Well, you can try to explain it, but really you have to just get it. It's an NI thing. TI are things, it links to things that are conditional, that have conditional elements and statuses that go turned on and off. Like arguments. Arguments are TI approachable, but music is NI approachable. What are the similarities and differences between meth and Adderall from a high feeling standpoint? Well, it's really quite similar, except the difference is because I almost always smoked meth rather than, I mean, I just snort it sometimes too. If you snort it, it's more like Adderall, I guess. But it's a matter of the quantities and the way you take it and the frequency that you take it and stuff like that. So with Adderall, I take it first thing in the morning and I don't take it again for the rest of the day. So I'm pretty tired now. I'm gonna go to bed in an hour or two, and I'll sleep well all night. But if you're smoking speed, then smoking meth, then you'll hit that pipe every few hours. You'll reload the pipe, hit the pipe every few hours, and so you tend to never go to sleep. You just tend to stay up until you crash. Try to make yourself, okay, I'm gonna put this away, and well, I mean, sure, I'll debate him. What do you want me to debate about? I mean, what's the topic? Why is it that SI polar people view types as characters, not instances of attention? Because it's like they view everything as, if you think about it, it's like this. Your SE comes in, you got data coming in, right? And you take some sort of action. You initiate an action. You go like, okay, because of this new change in data from the data field, I'm now going to dig a hole right here. And you begin digging a hole. Now, the first thing you have to have in place is the ability to remember that you've decided to dig a hole long enough for you to persist all the way through to finishing digging the hole, right? You've got to have an understanding of how to dig the hole. That's your TE. But your memory that you're gonna dig a hole, the decision has been made, that's SI. Okay. NI presumably would be, depending on the type you are and where it is in your stack, it's more likely to be an NI reason why you're digging the hole. Like maybe you have to go poop and you don't want to leave a poop in the middle of the trail or something, so you dig a hole. It's an NI reason to dig a hole. You're aware that it's an NIFE reason. You're aware that other people are going to be walking on this trail, or maybe you're just aware that you're going to walk on it back yourself. You don't want to step in the poop, so you dig a hole, right? That's an NI reason to dig a hole. Now, unless if you've done it before, if it's a habit of yours to dig a hole and poop on this thing every time, then it might be an SI reason. And every time we pass, I don't really have to poop, but every time we pass this spot, I dig a hole and poop here. Well, thank you. This is great, Kim. I appreciate it. That could be an SI reason, Let's see here. How does one exercise introverted intuition? That's a tough one. It's a tough one for me to answer, not because it's my ignoring function, but it's also a tough one because it's a knowing function. It's pre-creational. It's pre-will. But I would say if you want to practice NI, do this in real time. It's pretty straightforward. Stand like on your front lawn or something, and aim for a spot on a hedge, and then have your friend run across the lawn here, and wait for and recognize the moment when your NI says now is when you should throw it so that the ball will reach that spot at the same time the person does. That's something the NI will tell you is now throw it. So you'll be able to experience an instance of NI and be able to get some sort of sense of what that moment is like if you do the exercise I just gave you. And that's an exercise of real-time NI, which means its data source is SE. Its data source is not truths it has metaphysically. So it's not in its native environment, but it functions in real time for that in that capacity. What's your advice to ENTPs who make music? NE helps with ideas, but my NI makes it hard for me to streamline my ideas and make it finish. You can finish a song. My bad FI makes it hard for me to come up with it. Okay, that's not your NI that makes it hard for you to streamline. What you're saying because you have weak NI, maybe. And the thing is, if you're asking how to get more NI into your music, that's the right question to ask for sure if you're an ENTP. The answer is fail 100 times and try and don't get attached to any given one thing. So don't go like, I'm going to work this song until it's NI satisfactory. Go, I worked this song until I was done with it, until I got tired of it, and it's still not NI satisfactory. Let me try again, new song. And then eventually you'll get the hang of it. It's you gotta trust your instincts too. Look, the first thing the ENTPs do when their NI kicks in and says, that sounds shitty. ENTP goes, well, let me tweak it up a little bit. Maybe I can do something with it. It might sound okay. If I mix it with this other thing, maybe it will sound okay. In other words, first thing we do is we ignore our NI and think of other possibilities. How that NI obviousness could be wrong. Yeah, I mean, the other piece of advice I would give, practical pieces of advice I would give are pay a lot of attention to mixing and mastering, because I know a remarkable amount of people's response has to do with how well mixed and mastered the thing is. It has a lot, and that's an NI thing as well. As an ENTP, you're going to think, well, the idea comes through clearly, and the idea is, I like the idea a lot. It's resonating with me on an NI level, and so that should be good enough. Presentation of the track, the creation of the track, it's got to be big. Everything's got to be its own space, and it's got to have the right EQ range and stuff like that. So focus on mixing and mastering and EQing. Which finger is longer, my index finger or my ring finger? Well, of the two, my ring finger is longer. Will I write a book? I've written books already. It takes a long time. It's hard. I mean, the thing is, what I find is I'm better. My average production level now is better than it used to be. But I still have a range of hits and misses within my possession of tracks now that are closer or less close to the ideal. And that every track presents its own unique kind of challenges as well. Has anyone applied linguistic theories to study? Me. I have, Cynthia. That's the whole illocutionary locutionary frame that I talked about. Well, Wendy, you go to Dave Superpowers and you go to his objective typing school. Take his class for 8 months, and then you'll get a certificate that will invite you to try to take an all licenses all the time exam, which if you pass, then you get to decide whatever type you want to be, arbitrarily. So it's a pretty good deal. Anyway, as I was saying, the illocutionary locutionary thing is a linguistics. You're welcome, Wendy. Is a linguistics concept that I took from linguistics and brought into cognitive functions to point out the fact that the reason we keep having so much trouble with the taxonomy is because there's a third distinction to me between object and subject. There's also the illocutionary self. In other words,
very easily.
the self that, yeah, Andrea's right. That test of 16personality.com. Boy, it is so right. Anyway, I'll get to Jason's question in a second. To finish my question about that, the point about linguistics talks about speech acts and the implicit realities underneath them. So the illocutionary frame for a statement is belief. In other words, it's indistinguishable. You can't imagine saying, it is not the case that I believe that, and then whatever it is, the statement you're making, and have it be the same thing. Let's see. What was the question I said? So I was going to address? Oh, yeah. Jason's. What is the difference between polar R5 manifests and ESTPs and ENTPs? I think ENTPs are moister in general than ESTPs. The reason being, we're more democratic, more egalitarian, and so we don't feel comfortable with some of the harsher feeling-based realities of hierarchy. And as a consequence, we also don't, I don't like moisture because it interferes with the competitive aspect of things. I think that ESTPs don't mind the moistness that comes along with the competitive aspect of things. I don't mind the moistness that comes along with statuses. Like one of the most impactful things for me in terms of making me cry is watching Sports Center. If there's a story of an underdog team that overcame adversity to win the championship or something, I'm always bawling by the end of those stories.
Oh my God.
That's an NI thing, 100 Mile Media. 100 Mile Media talks about melodic phrasing and being good at coming up with catchy melodies and stuff. It's an NI thing. Because we are ignoring NI, we validate the external world via NI. We validate the internal world via FE. And so our songs are external to us. They're entities outside of ourselves that, when realized in their truest form, are distinct, whole, and correct entities. So because we validate that way, we tend to like catchy stuff, NI stuff, and we aspire towards it, even though it's not a conscious attentional process for us. It's deeply infused into the media we make, and we fail when we fail to infuse it adequately. So my worst videos are the ones where I'm inadequately NI and too much NE. Teacup Noir, I'm glad to hear that. If you've attempted to snort typology before, it's not really the recommended way. You should boof it, or you could smoke it, but it's really bad for your lungs. CBD oil is stupid. I've never done it, but it's stupid. I don't know. Why would you want to do the part of weed that doesn't get you high? That doesn't make any sense at all. Well, then you're a TE user, Jordan Spike. Jordan Spike says, as a musician, I see it as a self-discipline thing. I practice technical things at scale so I can accumulate tools to apply what I'm playing. You're using TESE there. You're learning how to play. Whereas I did go through periods of learning, like when I was learning how to play the chords, various chords, because I wanted to know how to play the chords. I never practiced scales, and I never learned any practical music theory, really. I just did it by playing around and ear. What would be the best strategy to develop an inferior NI? As fourth slot? You need to get with a dominant NI user to be your dual to handle that shit for you. Then being with the dual creates the environment in which your own fourth slot function can become useful, effective, valued, a happy part of your life rather than a challenge. Do humans have free will? And if so, how do you define it? Yes, humans have free will. I define it as that which is implied by the existence of conditionality. Because we have conditionality, it means we imagine scenarios other than the one that plays out, having played out, or we can predict scenarios playing out ahead of time, or consider several possibilities. Let's see, if I could attempt it this way, and if my shortcut on this little fix-it project works, it'll save me a few seconds. But if it goes bad, it could cause this problem here, and then I'll have a much bigger problem. Or I could walk out of the garage and get the right tool, and then this will happen. That's using conditionality, considering the problem in front of you as to whether you want to approach it one way or another. The fact that conditionality exists is evidence that, in fact, we have free will, because the capacity to do that allows us to consider our actions before taking our actions and make a choice. The idea that we wouldn't have free will, if we do have free will, we can come up with an example of something that doesn't have free will, namely a rock or perhaps a river. A river is an agent that moves, but it doesn't have free will. And we can explain the distinctions as being ones of conscious application of will and or having a frame in which will is applied, namely some sort of desired goal, some sort of teleological frame. So the answer to that question is, yeah, we have free will, because if we didn't have free will, then what are you distinguishing against? To say that nothing has free will, that there is no such thing as free will, then what is the distinction to be made between agents that have consciousness and agents that don't have consciousness? And if every direction is up, is the word up really meaningful? Whereas if we don't have that problem, if we do have free will. So, for lots of definitional reasons, we must have free will. And besides that, we all act as though we do. We hold each other accountable for our actions. If somebody commits a crime, they go to jail, etc. Practicing the guitar as a means to an end and not obsessed with the guitar as an end unto itself. Use it as a tool to make music I want to make. I mean, that's the same approach I have towards instruments. I don't try to get good at the instrument. I try to use the instrument to make good music. Okay, so Grump Banner, free will doesn't exist. You are a product of the natural world, and as such are compelled by the biological impulses which allows life to continue. What you're not factoring in is that implicit to our biology are randomizing factors that make it impossible for us to be completely predictable. We are open systems, self-learning information processing machines. And as a consequence, there may be some sort of frame through which we all universally are limited in our free will. I'm not saying we're unlimited in it. And there's no doubt that people are more or less reflexive, though. So what's the distinction to be made there? I'm less reflexive than I used to be. At one point in my life, I condemned people who used different sets of values than I did because I didn't understand the way that they were reflective of attentional variation. And I tended to make attribution bias, that is to say, assuming that people were choosing things that they were doing that weren't necessarily their choices, but were instead some reflexive habit of theirs. However, I've gotten less reflexive. So given that we can draw a distinction between more and less reflexive behaviors, then certainly there's some need for a term to draw a distinction between those two things. For example, I can take control of my breathing or not. So what's the distinction there? Is there a difference? Well, yes, existentially, we all know what it's like to not pay attention to our breathing and still breathe. And we know what it's like to pay attention to our breathing and intentionally breathe. So what is the quality that's being measured by intentionality there, or described by intentionality? If it's not free will, then what is it? Shapiro is vulnerable. He's smart, he's a good debater, but he's vulnerable to, well, me. Going through function stack, I can't figure out whether I'm an ENFP or ENTP. I can completely relate to each type's second and third function. Well, if you completely relate to each type's second and third function, then you either don't understand the distinction between FI and TI, or are not judging the distinction with TI, which would mean you're judging with FI, which means you're an ENFP. Because the distinction is very clear, and if you use one as a tool function, you are unable basically to use the other one as a tool function, as a tool for anything. TI says, let me pretend as though I were not a party in this equation. So for you, it would mean I'm going to evaluate this question of whether I'm an ENTP or an ENFP as though I were a third party with no interest in it whatsoever, that I had no care about the outcome of it. If you do care, if you have a preference and it's evaluating, and as you evaluate these type descriptions, you're really looking to what you'd prefer, which words you'd prefer applied to you, than more than which words are most consistent with data, then you're using FI, and you're going to have more difficulty identifying your type, possibly. ENTPs are possible for them as well to question their type, but it's most likely to be on the grounds that they think they're INTPs because they think they're so TI. Would you consider preset learning a TE thing, like someone telling you how to do something step by step, do it with you for a few minutes, then leave you alone if they've seen you do it well enough? Yeah, basically. I think that's TE. I mean, and the thing is, that's the kind of metaphysical TE. That's the across time or turn-based aspect of TE that I'm better at. I'm pretty good at making lesson plans for teachers, instructing them on how to walk through a classroom process. I'm pretty good at understanding the classroom process, both at an NI level, that is to say, understanding how classrooms work and being able to apply that universal understanding of classroom dynamics to a new specific lesson, for example. And I'm pretty good at the SI aspect of it, knowing how I've done it in the past and what's worked. So I'm both those data streams for TE metaphysical come into play to help me be good at doing that kind of algorithmic heuristics for people. Okay, so Remy D'Andresi says, I mean, in a philosophical way, I don't see how free will exists. Well, I mean, the problem with this is people think that because individuals are influenced in their decision making by multiple factors outside of their own control, or by just externalities, or by momenta, like, being in the process of doing this action right now when this thing happens. All those things are hugely influential in our decision making. But of course, to expect that they wouldn't be is to expect us to live in a vacuum in order to have free will. Obviously, we're reactive, responsive, and additionally, we have a manner of attention called deliberation, where we can consider or judge a given set of data and process it in order to come to some sort of conclusion about it. We can process it with our feelings. We can process it with our thinking and our logic. Sometimes we're forced to make a decision before we feel adequately decided about something. And other times we have an indefinite amount of time to make that decision. And that tends to correlate with the real-time or metaphysical dimensions. Interestingly, in the real-time dimension, we tend to have longer times to make decisions because generally things in the physical dimension are static. The problems we're dealing with are physical ones. If we're dealing with metaphysical problems, then we're probably dealing with people and or ideas. And a lot of times when we're dealing with people and communications, then there's more pressing time concerns because we're not just linking to something that's relevant to ourselves, as we are more likely to do with FITE. I think Jordan Peterson's an ENTJ. Let's see. How confident is third slot TI confident in its logical conclusions? Well, I think INFJs are more confident than ISFJs, which makes sense because NI is more compatible with TI than is SI fundamentally. SI doesn't give you much help with TI. It's because SI is saying, well, take what you've learned before, but TI is saying, no, deal with this finite set of realities being presented in front of you according to a universal grammar. So SI doesn't help TI very much. So INFJs are stronger in their TI, or more confident in it than ISFJs, but INFJs also come across as more confident than they actually are because they're aspirational in it. They only like to achieve good things with their third slot. They don't really like to fail at it at all. They feel bad if they fail at it. Have I heard of the CTMU theory? No. What did it say? You think free will extends to external actions or is confined to internal choice? Well, I mean, actions, external actions or physical actions, actions in the physical world, like SE stuff, those stem from a data stream, a couple of different data streams. One being NI if it's action in real time. But if it's following through on some previously decided thing, then it's coming from SI primarily. But what I would say about that is the decision-making process, between the decision-making process and action is knowledge. So if I TI judge something logically sound, a decision, let's say I'm playing cards and I'm playing like hearts or something, where you can really pay attention to which cards have been played and which ones haven't. And I realized that using deductive reasoning that there are no more clubs left or something, except for the one in my hand. So I can't lead that, or I'm going to hold on to it. Well, that's what happens there is you do the processing with the TI, and then it goes into SI status keeping place where you go, okay, now I remember there are no more clubs. I don't have to remember any of the details how I deduced that. Now I just need to remember the status that I've deduced. And I don't need to keep track of why it's that way. I can just accept that it is because I remember having already decided it and having already processed it. So then you take the action of playing the other card. Now, is that free will? Well, it's free will in the sense that you nothing is preventing you from playing the worst card, but it's also indicative of the fact that nothing escapes a teleological frame. Everything that we do or say or attend to is invested with or already has purpose to us. Otherwise, we can't understand it at all. Chris Langan, I mean, I don't know who this guy is. I'm curious as to what this theory is or something, but he's a racist crackpot who begs for money online. I don't know who Patrice O'Neill is. That's why I said there should be a distinction between psychological and philosophical free will. Okay, well, make the distinction then. What is it? Are types predetermined by our parents' type? If so, if yes, I don't know where type, how or when type is determined in a person. So in a psychological sense, you have free will if you're not brainwashed or strongly manipulated. Well, I mean, I would say you're less constrained in your there are fewer constraints upon you. If you're being brainwashed or manipulated, if you're being manipulated, that means you're being leveraged in some fashion. If you're being brainwashed, I mean, you're probably also being leveraged in some fashion. That's really the problem with the brainwashing. Nobody can brainwash you without your consent or without not caring about your consent. Do you think we live in a matrix? I think there's a decent chance we're in a sim. I mean, the reasoning behind the argument is very sound. It's convincing. I wonder if this theory is rooted on the free will argument of biological determinism. No, the idea that we live in a simulation is rooted on the idea that if you extrapolate out from our current simulation technology, you would conclude that eventually we'll be able to simulate something that's very much like the experience of being alive in the world. And at least in a thought experiment, we're able to imagine a simulation where it's indistinguishable from that, and further imagine in a thought experiment that we could enter such a simulation removed somehow from our identity for the duration of that simulation, only to come back to our real identity at the end of the simulation. If we imagine those variables, then we think, okay, is that possible? Well, it seems like it's probably possible sometime in the distant future. Well, if it's possible for such a simulation to be created in the distant future, then it's almost certain that we're in that simulation. And because it's very unlikely that we'd be the quote unquote base universe, if such a simulation were possible, then there'd be potentially billions or trillions of concurrently run simulations of individuals just like you and me going through lives and universes that are all contained within computers and some base reality. And it would be more likely in for any given person that you'd be in one of those trillions of simulations than in the base reality. So I buy that argument, but I'm not sure I buy the fact that we could ever simulate something that's as real as life. Could be the challenge to one of the premises there. Okay. Are people with lower IQs happier than those with higher IQs? I feel like I'm just intelligent enough to be miserable and be happier if I dropped a couple IQ points. I'm happy. I mean, as far as I can tell. The whole happy thing. I don't know. I don't know exactly what it would mean to be happy. I have a much clearer sense of what it would be to be more enabled to exercise more freedom. I have a lot of liberty, but limited freedom because I don't have unlimited funds. And I imagine freedom as being good and as presumably making me happier in some sense. But I guess for almost the whole of my life, except maybe some parts of childhood, I don't think I really get that concept of being fundamentally happy. I do get the concept of being generally enthusiastic at the moment or less enthusiastic. I don't know. Feelings are hard for me. I don't know. Why are ISTPs labeled as amoral? Well, because your fourth slot FE is particularly brutish. So ISTPs are very tit for tat and not very forgiving at all. ISTPs believe that if something's fair, it's okay. So if you do something to piss them off and they feel disrespected, they will disrespect you to make it feel, even though get a certain amount of satisfaction of like, yeah, fuck you. I mean, everybody's capable of doing that sometimes, but ISPs are more prone to it. So I think it has to do with their poor fourth slot FE. It manifests in kind of negative ways. Well, what's it about, his theory, CTMU? Give me a little bit about it. Give me some frame of reference. Supposedly IQ is negatively correlated with conscientiousness, and conscientiousness is positively correlated with happiness by some definition. Okay, well, that might be the case, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody with high IQ is low happiness. How much you need conscientiousness to be happy is contingent on your particular circumstances. Some people need to be more conscientious because their environment requires more consciousness of them than others. Emotional intelligence is the greatest indicator of overall success. I don't know what emotional intelligence is exactly. I mean, I get the idea that reading other people, like I get that aspect of it. But don't you need to have a choice for your will to be free? If you don't choose what you want, so it can't be free. But you do choose clearly. If you potentiate out several conditional possibilities before making a decision on one of them, then what could that meaningfully be called other than a choice? Then why is it worth me looking into? If it's so difficult to explain, you can't give me a quick summary of what it's about at all. Then it doesn't pass my threshold of being worth my attention. CTMU theory, huh? Okay. Okay. The thing is, I don't know what this is about, but I will say that it's absolutely true that you cannot have any understanding of reality that doesn't begin with the observer. That there is no reality that's not manifested by an observer as a function of that observer. There's no reality we can communicate anyway or establish that's free from observation, and it's the critical component in making correct models is recognizing that the object and subject, the observer and the subject are different things. One has a sense of the self as a subject that takes action in the metaphysical dimension, where one is like, okay, I am me, but I'm also a subject taking action here and affecting statuses and stuff. Similarly, in the physical dimension, I am me, but I'm also responsible for the shit I do. So, in that sense, we can never really understand reality as something detached from agency. It's an expression of agency. Everything we communicate is, every observation we refer to is, every piece of data has been observed. Literally everything is a function of observation. How did me and Kim meet? Well, we met because we both were on OkCupid. We met on OkCupid. I had a OkCupid page put up with some help from the people on the channel to make me seem more desirable to women. And it worked on Kim, and we went on a date. And I went on a couple more dates, but with different people. But I was already kind of stuck on Kim. I don't know. It's just something about her that I kept thinking about her. I kept wanting to talk to her on the phone, and I fucked it up at first. First date, I fucked it up by throwing a little tantrum because she wouldn't sleep with me, and then I had to sweep. I had to call her ass up and be like, come on, come to Denny's with me. I am so sorry. Let me take you for pancakes, okay? I promise. I really am sorry. I didn't understand. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I swept my ass into a third date at we went thrift store shopping, and that date ended in a blowjob. So I call that a successful date. You're right, Jen. I did say in one of my old videos I was looking for an ISFJ woman. I made a song about looking for an ISFJ as well. I thought Kim at first was an ESFJ, but after a couple weeks I realized she's not. She's an ISFJ. Isn't that the more important question, whether we control our reactions to biological programming, which is beyond our control, given that they'll progress our lives? I don't know what the last part of that question is, but the point is, we have varying degrees of autopilot, and as we mature, if we engage in a lot of metacognition, we can learn to be less reflexive in our responses to things and more considered. One could easily enough say that in that instance, we are choosing to be more free in our application of will. Additionally, you could go the other direction and say, for some of us who are more prone to deliberation and more prone to hesitation, we can learn to be more responsive to our NI go knowledge, and in that regard, free ourselves from our reflexes somewhat. We can only really establish for sure freedom, comparative freedom within the self. For example, you can compare how free one was as a baby to how free one is now. When I was a small child, I was much less in control of the response to my emotions. If I was very upset, I would probably throw a little tantrum or stomp my feet or something like that. Now I make more informed choices about that. I still can be very reflexive about my emotions because I don't understand them very well. But regardless, one learns things and one learns to apply them and become less reflexive. In that capacity, we know that varying degrees of free will exist, and therefore we can deduce the free will exists. But that's something you can only establish in the individual, not as a object of analysis that exists outside of any observer exercising it. Let's see. What other questions are there here? It appears to me the role function manifests merely in support of motivations manifested in the dominant function. Would you agree? Primarily, yes, I would agree, Birdie Blue, that when I'm looking around chances are it's for something to make a joke about or something to include in a story that I'm telling or whatever. Occasionally, I'll use my SE for its intended purpose. When I go thrift store shopping, when I go to yard sales, I'm looking at all the things. I'm trying to look at everything, and I'm actually trying to look at everything. I'm trying to be aware of the fact that my eyes will skip over shit and I won't process because I'm thinking about something else in my head at the same time. So I'm trying to look at shit, but by and large, my SE serves my NE's purposes rather than the other way around. And for Kim as well, NI serves SI's purposes. So she points to truths that are consistent with her SI generally or not in conflict with it. And she's not going to point to those that are inconsistent with it. Let's see. What else are we seeing here in the old question-o-roonies? What are your thoughts on visual typing? It's bullshit. Or it's not bullshit. I mean, look, there are correlates. When I see somebody looking back and forth with their eyes, looking up and looking back and forth, I go, oh, they're inning. There are correlations that are pretty reliable. But the problem with it as a way to type people is there's no explanation for the mechanics, and there's no logical, there's no mechanical relationship between them beyond exclusivity. If my eyes are darting back and forth like this, then they're not staying still. So they're all binary, but that's not how functions work. And there's no reasoning behind like, well, why are your eyes doing that you can reliably apply to test the thing out. And it's just that it's not reliable. That's it. What does polar FI look like? Poor emotion control or regulation. Failure to recognize when you're being motivated by your feelings until they're really strong. So I might be, I'm more able to recognize that now. And I think about it a lot. In fact, when I'm going to say something to Kim or when I'm feeling like busting her because she's hurt my feelings or I'm feeling resentful or something like that. And I'm finding something to critique. Now I'll sit there a lot of times and think, okay, Eric, you're in your feelings right now. You're feeling resentful. Well, I'm feeling resentful because of this thing I want to critique, because she fucked up, because blah, 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 blah. And I go, okay, well, that's what you're feeling, Eric. Now, it's true what you're saying. The argument you're making is defensible. You can make that argument, but is that really the best argument, or are you just trying to act out your feelings here? What are the other arguments? Because sometimes my feelings can muddle my TI a little bit if they're strong enough. What if there are two options and two conflicting wants corresponding to those options? Which is chosen, or is the choice free? Well, it's not the choice that's free. It's the individual who's freely choosing. That's the problem with that question, is it's turned around the wrong direction. What does countervalued FI look like? Countervalued FI looks like what Kim has, which is, number one, she doesn't really like my expressions of FI at all. So I think she finds them inauthentic, perhaps. But beyond that, she doesn't seem to get that, like, that's how I authentically express my FI, even if it's kind of goofy or whatever. Or you might think of it as being, I'm saying words that aren't true. If I call her my perfect, precious angel, she might critique it on grounds that I'm not being literally true. She's not literally an angel, nor is she literally perfect. And she might be precious to me, but she's not fundamentally precious any more than any other human being or something. You could critique it like that if you wanted to. But Kim will find reasons to critique that, and she'll say, no, you're lying, or you're just roll her eyes or hit me or whatever. She doesn't want to hear my loving tenderness. She wants to just reject it. And sometimes it's a conflicted relationship with it, because she's fairly strong in her FI as well. She has strong feelings when she feels as though she's been wrong in some sense, or I've been inconsiderate, or I'm not paying enough attention to her, or whatever. She'll have very strong feelings, and she'll want to see me express certain feelings in certain ways on her terms, right? That's the thing about your sixth function, is you like it on your terms, and you don't like it imposing constraints on you. So I like to use TE on my terms in certain projects where I do, but I don't like to be limited in my choices in those projects by TE at all. I want it to be something I use in nodes that I define with other functions rather than defining nodes itself. TI/TE, which is smarter, depends what you're trying to do. TI is smarter in a public sense, like you're more likely to impress people with TI than you are with TE, because TI is all about communication. And if I'm communicating very intelligently, then people are going to think I'm really smart, even if I can't fix a doorknob. How can you determine whether the person is a sensor or intuitive type who's become disconnected from intuition because of social conditioning? Nobody becomes disconnected from intuition because of social conditioning. Remember, it's a habit of attention. So if I'm paying attention to new ideas all the time, I don't have to verbalize them. I don't have to make anybody aware of that. I'm just attending in my own head to new ideas. No matter what your social conditioning is, you won't stop doing that if you're an ENTP or an ENFP. Similarly, if I'm an INFJ or an INTJ, I won't stop distilling things down into their singular truths. I won't stop finding the message of the thing, so to speak, regardless of whether people like it or not. So I don't believe social conditioning has anything to do with that. Let's see. Other than eye movements, is there anything more substantial? Could there be body type, brain correlations, or the functions selected experientially? I tend to think NTPs tend to be tall and skinny, but they're not all. And I tend to think INFJs are round-faced, kind of pudgy, but they aren't all. And ISFJs tend to be more soft and plump, and then those ESFJs and ISFJs do than say other types, I guess. But the thing is, I wouldn't rely on that for typing anything. It just seems to be that way to me, and is not reliable. But just because you always have a reason to do something doesn't mean it's not free. That's the problem with determinism in general. It assumes that because you can construct narratives of causality to explain how or why you came to a given decision, that therefore that decision was caused by those factors, or that because it's possible to construct narratives, therefore all actions must be reducible to those such narratives. But in reality, those narratives are meaningless, because decision making is a complex and irreducible expression of being. It's not something that exists outside of an observer. I've thought that before about INFJs. It's just a reaction for childhood trauma. My inclination there, and believe me, it's just that, it's not even a hypothesis, is that potentially INFJs are people whose parents are childlike and who have to play the role of the adult at a very young age, and who cannot rely upon their parents' logic to allow them to make predictions about how their environment is going to react to their behavior. They can only rely on their parents' emotional state as a guide for how the environment is going to present itself on this occasion. So that would make sense that INFJs would be like that. And I would also say that it makes sense that it's NI rather than the more volatile a parent is in their childlikeness, the more likely it is to be an NI response, because you're looking for the cues that are consistent throughout the volatility. You're looking to predict this individual's volatility. I'm sorry, the more volatile it is, the more SI. The more neglectful or disinterested it is, the more NI, because then you're looking for ways in rather than for ways to avoid. Yes, I do live near Pomona. Hussein Barani. Yes, sure, let's hang out and smoke a cig. I live in Laverne. We could go get coffee after the live stream if you feel like it. I've got maybe another hour or two left up in me tonight. Do you live near Norm's in Pomona? Is type compatibility a valid thing, or is every relationship an exception in itself? Type compatibility is a valid thing. It is not the case that any two types can have a good relationship with each other. I don't believe that. I don't necessarily think you have to be with your dual, but I think it's pretty important to be in your same quadra. Otherwise, you're going to have value conflicts that are pretty substantial. I think that ESFJ ENTP could be a fine relationship. Mine didn't work out, but it wasn't for a general lack of compatibility. Because ENTPs don't really care that much about things being perfect, you know? We'll make do. We're adaptable. We just need the other person to be fair, cooperative, and on the same team.
And she was none of the above.
Well, she was a good teammate in general. She wasn't fair. She was pretty cooperative.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, you live in Upland. Okay, well, I could go to Upland for coffee too. That's fine. Yes, pineapple belongs on pizza. I love pineapple on pizza. Kimberly, what's our most common pizza we get?
We get cheese and pineapple.
Mm-hmm. It's like a little trip to Hawaii and Italy at the same time. What are ENTPs like when they are intoxicated? Well, intoxicated on what? Yeah, I know that. Here, I'll put down my phone number here. I got to charge my phone. That reminds me. It's totally dead right now.
You have the other phone.
Oh, yeah, I do, but I don't even know what the number is. That. Where is my charging cord? Here it is. Charging cord. Come right here. I'm going to charge you inside a bear. All right, so where am I going to plug this into? I guess I could plug it into what? Can I plug it into? I don't have anywhere to plug this into. Kim, can you give me that brick? Oh, here, this. I can plug it into. All right, good. Now I'm charging my phone, so I'll be able to receive telephone calls or texts once I turn it back on. Okay, am I still a cop? Yes, I'm a type cop. I'm also a debate cop. I'm a YouTube cop, and I'm a music cop. I'll basically police anything. I usually won't police real scientists on real science because it's too hard for me. But when typing someone and recognizing any SI axis, what behaviors, expressions do you look for to differentiate between ENTP and ENFP? You look for TI. If an ENTP is somebody who's going to create in ways that are ideationally logical. So, for example, I'm doing a lot of videos about typology, and I have my own take on it that changes some things but retains some elements and mixes together a bunch of elements taken from a bunch of different places, because ENTPs use any SI, that is, say they draw what they've read before and they tweak it out in ways that make it more TI sound or fit into a single TI hole or something like that. So they're going to make videos about shit like this that are very mechanically focused. But you'll notice my understanding of cognitive functions, I'm not talking a lot about how the INFJ is like this and blah, 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 and describing the types. I'm mostly talking about how functions are operant mechanically with each other and how people manifest attentional manners in this way or that way. So that's a much more abstract and mechanical understanding of cognitive functions. If you have an ENFP who's talking about cognitive functions, they're going to be talking about the experience of what it's like to be an ENFP, or what it's like to have FI, or what it's like to, it's going to be a different kind of talking. It's not going to be ideationally making cases that are subject to argumentational scrutiny. And to the extent that they do so, it'll be almost accidental, and they won't like it if you present argumentational scrutiny against what they say. Whereas I'm perfectly fine for anybody to come in here and debate my position on cognitive functions till they're blue in the face. I'm quite confident I'll win all the arguments. Could you speak on INTP creativity? INTPs are a lot more creative than they let on. They don't get a whole lot of creative projects done, usually, because they're polar SE, although some of them are more effective at getting shit done than others. My friend Matt's pretty effective at getting music stuff done. He's an INTP. And, when Spacey came over here, he and I worked on a song. He's a great singer, and he's funny. He's improvisationally effective with language, but you don't hear it a lot because the reason is INTPs are too deliberative. By the time the moment in the conversation, by the time they decided to say that funny, clever thing, that moment in the conversation has passed because they've deliberated about it too long. So you don't hear them actually display their creativity very much, but they're actually much more creative than you're going to witness. Which type communicates best with ENTPs? INFJs, probably. Or other ENTPs. But I mean, it depends on what kind of communication you're talking about. In a lot of ways, Kim, you could say, communicates more effectively with me than any INFJ because she's on the complimentary page. When we get in the car, she goes, "We're going to Norm's," or wherever it is we're going, because she knows that I've forgotten. She remembered that last time I forgot, and the time before that I forgot, so she's going to just assume it's going to be the same this time. And in this instance, it always is, and I always have forgotten, and I'm always happy to be reminded. So in that regard, she's very compatible. What's my education level? I've got a bachelor's degree in English. Some teaching credential work done. Can mental disorders ever be empirical? Yeah. You mean, are they explicable exclusively through some sort of physical problem? Some of them. Like, for example, if you have a mental problem called railroad spike through the brain, then it's pretty clear that the railroad spike through the brain is probably the source of that problem. It's a sound empirical explanation. And we can deduce this by that it's causally related because we imagine conditionally a scenario in which the individual does not have a railroad spike through the brain and ask ourselves, is he in the same mental state? The answer is no. Therefore, we can conclude the railroad spike caused the brain the mental disorder. I already put my phone number in there, didn't I? I thought I did.
Don't put your phone number in there.
Why not? I don't care. It's already on the internet, Cam. It doesn't matter. I can handle people calling me. I'm not worried about surprises like you are. Well, hold on. I'm not even left here yet. I mean, I'm obviously still sitting here. Let me continue this for another like 20 minutes or so, and then I already did put it there, and then it's 909-720-2261.
You're a nut job.
I don't care, Kim. What?
I do.
If somebody calls me, Kim, you know what they're gonna get?
You?
Hi, how's it going? Oh, why are you calling me? Oh, cool.
Eric.
Or I could give him one of these. You did like that. I know. Nobody calls me. Some people do. Sometimes people call me out of the blue. It's kind of cool. I think it's funny. It's interesting. If not, I just hang up on them. On a Sion, ESTJ. Okay, I'll type losing. Who's drunk? Who's drunk is going home? My drunk? Bob's drunk? Joey's drunk? The strong SI actually use pattern recognition? No, not really. Kim well, she'll use it. She has a lot of really good NI ideas to pop up, things that aren't linked to her at all. So, like if she'll note something like, you should submit this idea to Dr. Phil, or the vocal sound. I don't like the way the vocal sound here. She's almost always right with her when NI does pop its head up because she uses it fairly sparingly, but she never. If it's in conflict with SI, she doesn't. She always prioritizes the SI. Yeah, I don't drink alcohol, Dr. S. Bob. The Bauhaus are doing a 2019 USA tour. The band. It's not a makeshift bong. I got this bong for Christmas. It's a nice bong. Well, I don't know what he means by there being saviors. Does he mean that your third function dies for people's sins and rises from the dead and then forgives everybody for being bad? Or do you mean they rush in and save you? I mean, I do think that there's a, yeah, I think, well, you could call it a savior. For me, FE makes sense as a savior in the sense that it stops me. At some point, I'll start being nice because I see people are getting mad, I guess. But I still think of it as being late all the time. I've already pissed people off by the time my FEs come in and go, okay, wait. No, you know what? Maybe I can be nice. Is Starbucks going to be closed? I don't know. You want to go to Norm's? Or what? We'll find something up there.
That's not him.
And well, Jordan is contributing a useful observation that maybe Hassan and I will show up just close Starbucks and weep inconsolably in the parking lot, unable to think of any other options. You're a 20-year-old ENTP. Your study cognitive functions extensively and eliminate all other possibilities, so I'm certain. My psychology studies are beginning soon. I'm looking to continue into psychiatry, and Jungian analysis. Well, good for you. I hope you've watched all my videos. You say you studied extensively. You know, you should really watch all of my videos then. Twice. All of them. I think psychology is a great path for ENTP. I think ENTPs are insightful and observant about other people when they're given a purpose frame externally. We do well with external discipline. Like if you have a job as like psychiatrist or something, like psychologist, then you'll do your job well.
Just make sure you have an ISFJ there to wake you up in the morning.
Yeah. Do you believe addictions are more common for certain types? Yes. And the utilization of substances used for different kinds of coping? Yes. I think the one universal is alcohol. Every type likes alcohol for different reasons. But in general, action types, SE DOMs and NE DOMs like speed or uppers. Serotonin types like INTJs or INFPs, I guess. I'm not sure about INFPs. INFPs might be, actually, INFPs and ENFPs might be dopamine types as well. But yeah, there's dopamine types, there's serotonin types, there's estrogen types, and there's some other type too. I know I've never seen the show Black Mirror. Don't use torch on herb. Will burn triches. Oh, the trichones. That's okay. I smoke so much weed, it doesn't really matter. Socionics argues that SI is not past focused, but NI is. Do you see this with Kim being, with her being an ISFJ? The SI users like to talk about past. Socionics is wrong about that. You think about it like this: you have an event occur. In other words, you do some sort of action, and there's an event that occurs. Let's say. You spill your coffee at Starbucks all over the lady who serves the tea by accident. Now, SI will put that away as a memory, and it will remember what happened. NI will parse from that the takeaway or the meaning of it, or the lesson to be learned, or the universal truth to be gleaned from it, and store that away without really paying much attention to remembering the specifics of the event, just remembering that if you don't get the little sleeve on it, then you might burn your hand and spill the coffee or something. So from that point forward, you get the little sleeve on it. SI might also get the little sleeve from that point forward, but for different reasons, because it always assumes the way this one's going to happen is the same as the past one happened. Now, NI is going to generalize out. So they'll say, I want the little sleeve on tea as well at a different restaurant. SI might not think of it again in a different restaurant because it's a different kind of drink and it's a different restaurant. So there's not the associative link. Any SI uses association as a starting point and external data as a starting point for ideation. And it makes the two together to get disparate associations. Do you think NI has a clairvoyant psychic quality in an unconscious way? Well, I mean, what it does is it reduces fluid, fundamentally irreducible processes into approximations. And it's good at, without consciously doing so, letting all those approximations settle into each other until a pattern pops. And you go, I see, this is how this is going to play out. So they get this reputation for being able to predict things. It's true, but only in the relatively short term. However, with social stuff, especially like INFJs, they can play long-term social games. Like they'll keep track of when they last complimented you so that when they compliment you again, it's sufficiently infrequent to make it of extra value to you, but sufficiently frequent for you to link the two together and think positively of you. but sufficiently in proximity of potentially critical comments to make you give it more weight as legitimate, and they'll factor all that shit in, right? That's like a long game FE shit that INFJs do, because that's their NE processing how social processes work. NEFE. No, NIFI is not possible, because that would suggest that you know first and then deliberate. The reason that always is a knowing function followed by an action function is because, followed by an interface function, is because there's a gradation of deliberation. The most deliberative functions are judging. The second most deliberative functions are knowing. The third most deliberative are interface, and the least deliberative are action. So action are paired with the most deliberative, so you have balance out this kind of like medium thing. Least deliberative, most deliberative. And then the two middle ones are together because it's balanced in the same way. If you were NIFI, you'd never get out of your head, really. You'd know, first of all, the singular distillation of it, and then you'd deliberate about that singular distillation, about how you feel about it. Presumably, next you'd know how to do things and interface with the statics, with the systems world, those things that stay static in frame of reference. And then last, I guess, do shit in the physical world. It doesn't work like that, because you've got to have a certain ratio of put, get, and receive. So for me, I'm put first and then get. Third, I'm interface, which says, okay, I'm going to socially interface by being reactive in both real time and turn-based to changes on statuses. Only last do I know, and I know by remembering links to my personal experience. My Enneagram type is 784. It's my tri-type. I'm a person who sticks his head in the sand when there are problems and or ignores them, procrastinates, sticks my fingers in my ears and goes la 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 la, so I don't pay any attention to looming disaster until it becomes very pressing. Then I rush to act. INFPs are one of the two most interesting types, I think. Why do you think is FI primarily real-time physical and FE turn-based metaphysical? I'm curious about your reasoning. Well, the reason for it is, if you think about the native environment of FI, it is experiential. When you have feelings strongly, you know that you do because you experience them. And they're not something that they don't provide a data set that you can externally present to others and have them verify it for themselves. Only you have access to the data set, because you can't show somebody else or have them experience your feelings meaningfully. Now, that doesn't mean that feelings don't impact one's understanding of self or decision making across time. They do, and that's why all the cognitive functions have manifestations in both aspects. But the native aspect of FI is experiential. In contrast, the native aspect of FE is turn-based, because we're dealing with statuses of people for each other. And in general, FE has to presume that in between interactions with you, another party isn't going to change their perspectives on you very much. And that's not necessarily true. So it treats them as static in between instances. And additionally, FE is about universal approximations, what people want. They want to be liked, they want to be respected, they want to be seen as warm, they want to be seen as competent. And those are very, general sort of things, but FE users rely on everybody sharing certain fundamental universal needs and capitalizing on those. So it does so naturally with language and statuses, because since it's relying on you being the same between instances of interaction with you, it can't rely on the short-term feelings that are temporary, like I made you laugh, well, great. It has to rely on, now you think I'm funny, and that's a good thing.
That's it. Wrapped up.
Okay, I got to wrap it up. I guess I'm going to Upland for coffee. Kim doesn't let me do this for more than 2 hours, I guess. Oh.
2 hours is enough.
2 hours is enough, she says. So the torch is for burning away the wickedness in my soul. How would you make a personality test? The ordinal thing. It's up there somewhere.
Bye, Love Lou.
Also have what's known as the sodomy test, where I fuck you in the ass, and
Hey!
depending on the noises you make, I
You're
determine your type. That's
disgusting.
one of the way of physical typing I have. If you're kind of like then you're more likely an NFP. If you're like you're more like an STP. Pulling me over for pot. Why, you want to smoke some with me? Probably. All right, home fries, Husani, Hussein Varani. I'm gonna leave my house now and go up to the one on Foothill. Is it in Upland or is it in Claremont? Let me see what the address is. You put it down here. I gotta look at it again. 1013 West Foothill. Okay, I'll go there. I'll look at it on my phone, and I'll go there now. Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese.